Shalom, everyone. Welcome back. I am so happy that we have an opportunity to come together again and to interview yet another interesting member of our congregation, someone many of you have seen in and out of Beth Tikva in the course of the last few years. Dick is very active both at Beth Tikva and in his community. I know he has a standing commitment to lead services and read Torah over there. So sometimes you'll see him disappear in the middle of the month and come back. Well, now you know what he's doing. Something that you are just signing checks, right? But I know
Right.
better than that. So with me, of course, is Richard Dick Spiegel from Minneapolis, a dear friend of our congregation and an incredible member, whom I've asked to spend a little time with me and share a little bit about his life, his experiences. And as I always do, Dick, I'd like to start by you having us understand a little bit who you are and how you came to be who you are. And usually that means family members that came from the old country, etc. Welcome.
Well, I'm very happy to be able to share these parts of my life with this congregation. I've been attending services at Beth Tikva for about 6 years, and I must say I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a very important part of our stays in Naples. For over 20 years, we had a winter home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and for many reasons, we decided to move to Naples. And it was a very fortuitous thing that we did indeed. And Beth Tikva has been one of our anchors, if I can say that. I'm very happy about that.
That's family. That's great to hear.
Well, it's a pleasure. Now, let me just mention a few things about family and give a little background, as the rabbi mentioned. My father's side of the family came over from Miskolc, Hungary, around the turn of the century, a little before that. And they homesteaded in Mott, North Dakota, because at that time you could actually, what they called prove up on land. If you lived there for 8 or 9 months and put a little house there, the land was yours. And that's what they did. And my grandfather, my father's father, always said that he lived in Mott, the spot that God forgot. He said it was just, said, Richard, it was just terrible there. He lived to be over 100 years old. He was not a devout person, but he was very Jewish. And I'll never forget the inscription still on the chumash that he gave me when I was bar mitzvah, something to the effect that you will benefit to the extent that you use these books. And it stayed with me since I was 13 years old. And last year, June 22nd, I had my second bar mitzvah at age 83.
Mazel
It was one
tov.
of the most wonderful experiences I've ever had. Thank you. It was one of the most wonderful experiences I ever had. On my mother's side, they came over from Romania. My grandfather was a tailor, simple man, but a wonderful man, very devoted to his family. I never knew my grandmother, but my mother was one of 6 children, and it was a wonderful family. So that's a little family background. I've lived in Minneapolis my entire life, which is now almost 4 years, I'm happy to tell you. And it's really a wonderful community. I started in North Minneapolis, which really was the bastion of Jewish life during my bringing up. I would guess that 85% of the neighborhood, which comprised many, many, many blocks, was Jewish. I went to the Talmud Torah, where I was voted least likely to become president, but I did become president of the Talmud Torah, and that was one of the highlights of my life. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm still great friends with the then director. At one time, believe it or not, we had over 1,100 students in the Talmud Torah. Things have changed. The dynamics have changed, but it's still ongoing.
It's interesting now that I think about it, you're the third or fourth person that I interview from that area. And one of the common denominators I hear is how everybody knows everybody. It's a very, that's one of the things that Marsha Cohodes indicated, that her mother knew just about everybody and could mobilize them all. You've been an important part of that community. Tell me a little bit how you've added your talents to the community?
Well, I came by it honestly. My mother uh, was one of these people that was a mover and shaker in the community. She had a little brown book, and if you were in her little brown book, she called you, you didn't have a chance. Whether it was raising money, doing work for Tamatora, you name it. She was a real balabus. She really went out and got things done. So Marcia's mother and mine were probably of kindred spirits. Uh, it was a wonderful community to grow up in. It was very rich in culture and in warmth. Synagogues were plentiful in those days. Of course, we were congregated in it was all geographically contiguous, so it was a bit different than we have today. But it was a wonderful place to grow up. Very
Right.
rich culturally.
Now, there was no day school in those days, was there?
No, there wasn't there was a little shtibala, as we call it, a little shtibala,
Right.
and it didn't really come to anything until I would say the 1970s. And then it started, maybe a little earlier even, and then it started to grow. There's quite an Orthodox community in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, near the conservative synagogue that I go to, Beth El. Both synagogues start with Beth. Uh, I wonder what the connection is besides what it really means. Uh, and The day school there has grown, but beyond that, there's a very religious group there that has started their own yeshiva. And for a few families that are wealthy, they put a lot of money into it. And I think that Mike Fitterman's grandson, if I'm not mistaken, went there. If I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, I think
I
his son
think that
Jack's son.
was the origin of his affinity to religion. I believe today he's at a big yeshiva in Lakewood, New Jersey. So he's really moved on to the big leagues, I think.
I think you're right about that. I think you're right about that. I didn't really know him. His son Jack, I know. Lovely family.
Yeah,
I knew his father Ben very well.
I know someone in common with you that is Dr. David Danoff. And I have to confess, I called him today. I asked him to tell me a few things about you. And he mentioned that you became president of the day school in your day.
No, it was a Talmud Torah. It wasn't a day school.
I
It was
see.
an after-school school. And
Right?
the different Minneapolis was really the paragon of Talmud Torahs because it was not run by a congregation. It was run by the Jewish community. So you didn't have these turf battles about uh, whose kid goes to my school. It was a
Right.
communal school, and there was a time in my life when I was on a board of directors of a of an institution called Jesna, and Jesna
Sure.
did studies on Jewish education primarily. And one of the things they did best practices was on Talmud Torahs, and Minneapolis Day School was the model that they used. So
Interesting. That's wonderful.
yeah. Well, uh, so that community wise, I've been involved with the community since my early 20s. Uh, I was on a call today out of from a JDC, uh, and they asked people, "What was the turning point in your Jewish life?" It was a very interesting question. I found it very difficult to pick one, but I picked one. The one I picked was the Six-Day War.
Which, of course, right now we're observing the anniversary of. That's so interesting. Why
Exactly.
was it such a critical point for you?
Well, I was raised not in a Zionist home, but I was raised in a home where being Jewish was important and having Jewish protection was important. Minneapolis, unfortunately, for many years, uh, was really uh, a hotbed of anti-Semitism, and Jewish people were not allowed to go a lot of places. And there were covenants on buying homes, and Jewish doctors couldn't become doctors at hospitals. So they built Mount Sinai Hospital, which is not unusual, but it happened here too. Um, and so I always had that feeling of being very Jewish. I didn't. we practiced all the holidays, but I really didn't hit me until really the state of Israel I was young, but it was quite a marking event for me. And so when the state of Israel was teetering, we thought, on the brink of disaster, I, along with my friends that were part of the Federation's Young Men's Group in those days, took to the streets to raise money. And it was very moving to be with people, and the community pulled together, as did others around the country. It was very moving and gave me a great sense of Jewish peoplehood. And it was only a few years after that I made my first trip to Israel. So it really tied together.
How was that? How was the first trip to Israel?
Well, I cried when the plane landed.
Uh-huh.
It was very, very moving. Very moving.
Yes.
I thought about it for years, and we went with other people, and it was an experience. You'll never can replace the first time you go to Israel.
Correct.
You just can't do it. And Rabbi, you've been there so many times, and yet I'm sure you still get moved when you go there.
Every single time. You're right. It's interesting to see how those Midwestern communities generated so much love for Israel and so much activism. I know that Milwaukee is a completely different city, but that's where Golda Meir came from. And she must have sponged up that Zionist fervor, which was common in those Midwestern communities. Would you agree?
Absolutely. There was the feeling about Israel was absolutely embedded in the community. And I remember when I was active as a young man raising money, and I raised a lot of money in Minneapolis. I'm one of these people that I always felt that giving people the opportunity to support Jewish institutions was not a responsibility, it was a privilege. It was a privilege and something that you gained a lot from. You gained more than you gave.
Right.
By any measure.
Maybe I'm going to postulate you to run our fundraising committee here at Beth Tikva in the future.
Well, I did share the fund, the annual campaign of our Minneapolis Federation on 3 different occasions. So I have a little practice.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell me a little bit what you did as an individual in terms of your personal business life, etc.
Well, my father started a business that made hair care products that were sold to beauty salons. And I went to college at the University of Minnesota, graduated there, and went to work in the business. It was small, it was struggling, and but we were getting by. It wasn't always so easy, but the business thrived over the years. It thrived primarily because my father was the first person to invent a hairspray that you could spray on your hair and wash it out. The other ones was like shellac, and when you sprayed it on, you couldn't get it out.
Right.
So there was a need for the product. He provided the need, and so that was really kicked the company off. And then over the years, I eventually became president, and we took a company that became public company. Eventually, New York Stock Exchange, 650 employees.
Wow.
And we had a beautiful manufacturing office combination in the suburbs of Minneapolis. And we eventually, I don't know what it would be in today's dollars, I never calculated, but eventually we're doing about $150 million a year. And that was in 1987. That was quite a while ago. And fortunately or unfortunately, that was the days of hostile takeovers.
Correct.
And one of our competitors, a Jewish fellow out of Chicago, decided he wanted our business. So, long story short, myself and an attorney, we went out to try and find a better suitor, and we did in Dow Chemical. I knew it wasn't going to be good for me because I couldn't live in that culture. It's a very different. It was not an entrepreneurial culture. It was very, very different.
Yeah, corporate America is a different bird.
Entirely different. And what we did was very creative and very spontaneous often. And they would spend $1 billion making a plant that could produce polyethylene, but they couldn't understand really what drove our business. They were good at theirs, but not good at the others. And I won't
Right.
say any more about that because it's not very interesting beyond that.
So was your father a chemist? Did he
Yes,
have a background?
his background, graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1927 as a pharmaceutical chemist. He was a druggist.
Right.
Never practiced it. Never practiced it.
Right.
He started this little business, and it grew.
Right.
And thanks to his real brilliance, he
Nice.
was he was quite a man.
And you studied business management or whatever?
I studied business management. I studied advertising. I studied chemistry because that's part of the business.
Correct.
I was very fortunate they had a program at the university that allowed a person to take courses in different schools at the university without having a particular major. You had to have a goal as to why
Right.
you're doing it, which I did. And I had a professor, I'll never forget his name, Bukta, and he said he made it very difficult. He said, if you're going to be in this program, you're going to have to follow my strict guidelines. And strict he was. But
Well, it seems to pay off.
served me well.
So
Served me well.
your kids, your family members never got to work in the business.
No, they did not.
Uh-huh.
My brother was in it for a while, but that was it. That was the family involvement.
So did you retire after that?
Well, I tried a few businesses, and I made some money, and I lost some money. And one day I just said to Judy, I said, you know something? I'm not very interested in business anymore. It just wasn't interesting to me. So I started doing other things. I started being interested in gardening, where I started working at the University of Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. It's 1,400 plus acres of land outside of Minneapolis. Eventually, I became president of that wonderful institution. Today, there are over 30,000 members and 500,000 visitors a year. It's a beautiful place. If anybody gets to Minneapolis, it's a must place to see.
Well, maybe they'll ask you for a guided tour.
I could do that. I've been working in the gardens there, particularly the perennial gardens, now for almost 30 years.
Nice.
That's
Probably more than in the business.
No, I worked for longer in the business than that, but not by much.
Yeah.
Not by much. So,
Now, I know you read Torah for your congregation. How did you come about to do that?
a lot of years ago, way back in the 70s, mid 70s, they offered a course at my synagogue, Bethel, to learn how to read Torah. And so I took the course and started to read. And then one thing led to another, and I just kind of dropped off and didn't do it. And then one day I got a call. Would you read Torah? I said, I haven't read it so long, I don't know if I can. So I studied. Now, once a month I read Torah. And the rabbi's right. I go back in the winter once a month to read Torah. This week happens to be my parsha from my bar mitzvah.
Correct.
Bahalotecha. So I study every week, and I got a friend of mine in New York who constantly is telling me about a new chumash or a new this or that. He says, you got to read, you got to study from this. He was a yeshiva guy, and he's been steering me to a lot of good things.
Well, Pirkei Avot says, "Kne lecha chaver v'aseh lecha rav," right? And the Pirkei Avot says there's nothing more important than securing a teacher and procuring for oneself a good friend. It sounds like you've done both very well.
I did. I was very fortunate. I met him through business. And we've been friends now for probably close to 40 years. We talk every Friday afternoon.
And I know that your background is not one of these virtual backgrounds. So from the books in the back, I can see you spend time reading some of the material that he recommends.
I do. He's be on a series of books written by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and it's about every week there are 4 or 5 chapters in the book on that week's parsha, and I find him to be very illuminating. He's
Yeah.
to me an orthodox thinker who really is a person for everybody.
Yes, he's a modern
That's how I
thinker
feel
for
about him.
sure. Yeah, I've always admired him a lot. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to share with us a little bit about how this coronavirus sequestration has been for you. And of late, of course, if you can share your views a little bit of what has begun in your hometown with the George Floyd assassination and the uprising in our country.
Well, the virus, of course, is we have it here like every other place has it. We've been very careful in how we've dealt with it. Judy and I were talking the other day, and I said, I think this is, for me, it's probably been a very good thing. I've slowed my life down. I've eliminated some things that I didn't like to do that I know I'm not going to go back to again. And I find that I've been able to do some very fulfilling things. I'm reading more, so I'm taking the time to do these things. And I don't do it at a frantic pace. I guess my whole life was built on how fast can you go. And I was going
Right.
pretty fast, let me tell you.
Yeah.
For a lot of years.
Correct. So how do you see the situation in your city? We were talking before we started the tape about what the city council intends to do there.
Well, they intend to do something that's long overdue. They're not going to throw the police department out, but major reforms will be made, and I think the only way that it's going to happen here is to follow the Camden, New Jersey model, where they disbanded the police department. Everybody was fired, but then they hired them back. They went through and vetted all the people. They kept those that they thought were the appropriate ones.
Yeah.
Came up with new models of policing, and it's been very successful there. Minneapolis police, there are some things I know that weren't very good, and it didn't surprise me that you had this kind of an action. We have some of those. My guess is every police department has it. That would be my guess. Well, so we're very optimistic about moving forward in a very positive way.
That's good to hear from a resident of Minneapolis and somebody who knows what they're talking about, because the rest of us are just guessing and trying to play catch up most of the time. Richard, if you had to give us one good word before we go, what would that be?
The word that comes to my mind is you should live with shalom. You should have peace and tranquility and closeness with your family and your community.
That's nice. That's nice. And certainly that's what we're all trying to do. Hidden behind our Zoom windows, each and every one of us on a daily basis. But ultimately what we all want is exactly the same: to foster peace, harmony among all people. And hopefully that wish of yours will transcend our congregation, and soon we'll see our country come to its senses and find calm, tranquility, and, as you say, a sense of peace.
All I can say to that is amen. It should only happen.
Amen to you as well. I thank you for taking the time, Richard. I hope that people will enjoy listening to the two of us as much as I have listening to you. And hopefully before soon, you'll be back in Naples. And this time around, you won't hide. I'll ask you to return at least once.
Okay. I'll be pleased to do that, Rabbi. It'll be my pleasure.
All right. Again, I thank you. Be safe. And I wish you Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom and a hello to all my good friends at Beth Tikva. Thank you much.
Bye.